How are you? Hi, Harley. Can't see your face. Maria Paris is driving. Matthew's here. Some others are jumping on. So Christy Wooten. Christy has actually, how many years have you been doing title?
I started working for a title company my senior year in high school, and that was in 1991.
So before, yeah,
So
that's a long
30 something years.
That's
30 something
amazing.
years. Yeah, I have followed Christy around now from two companies because I don't like babysitting title companies. And I'll tell y'all, when I first started out, I had a title company I was very dedicated to, and I wasn't going to switch for nothing. And everybody kept telling me to switch to Christy. And I'm a Labrador, so I'm very loyal. I'll stick with someone until I can't anymore. And when I finally couldn't anymore, I'd gone to a closing and the person that was handling the closing, it was during COVID, stood back at the beginning of the door and let me do the entire closing and refused to answer questions because for fear she would get COVID with a mask on. And I was like, I am done. I am done. And when I was hunting down payoffs because they couldn't get payoffs and they said the title company said it wasn't their responsibility. I moved over to Christie and I realized at that point that in real estate, you need to have certain people on your team. As a realtor, more and more is expected of us, but if you're handling, you should not be handling all things title because that's not your lane. So there's a lot of things that I know it's not my lane, so I bring Christy into it because that's her lane. We can work and collaborate together, but I shouldn't have to be directing that ship. And so that's where when Christy came into my life, I all of a sudden got an assistant, believe it or not. And so that's what I would say to realtors is be very like kind of look at it in the sense of um that's like having your own assistant. And believe it or not, like Christy they help me order help me order surveys, they help me order home warranties. They keep me in line sometimes. And sometimes I have to say, I jump, I don't know how they deal with me, honestly, because I jump really fast sometimes. And I'm like, hey, remember that 45-day close? Can we close in 7 days, please? Um, so Christy is very vital and your title company should be that. Christy, you want to start out telling us a little bit about Concierge Title and where y'all are at?
Sure, sure. So we are statewide, so we can handle anything in the state of Texas. We can process it here and close virtually if your clients need that. Our office is located in Horseshoe Bay. We're right behind the Bank of the West building. They're new, the building they remodeled. It used to be the Tall Texan, what, people who have been here for a while know it as. Um, we do offer in-office closings if that's what your clients prefer. We offer remote online notary closings for any seller, and we offer mobile notary for any buyer seller that needs that service. And we also offer DocuSign for all cash buyers. Now, all of those services are free of charge. There are no additional fees for that, no courier fees, no remote online notary fees, and we cover all mobile notary fees. So that's a real benefit to your clients who aren't coming in person.
Nice, nice. Well, Christy, we were talking about who to bring on, and so we were like, let's do a title company. So we wanted to just have you here. I'll tell y'all my first deal. I'll tell y'all the horror story of something that happened to me back in 2017. I got a title commitment, and I said to my broker and 3 other realtors, what do I do with this? I didn't know. They didn't teach us what to do with it. And they said, just review it. Well, what am I reviewing for? Just review it. If anything stands out, you'll know. Well, I looked over it. None of it meant anything to me. I had no idea what it was. But on the very back page, there was something on there that I didn't catch. And the title company didn't say anything. We get ready. We get to 2 days before closing. We're 45 days into it. And the lender says, we're not lending on this house. The buyer has $1 million lawsuit, something against him. It was on the back page of the title commitment. And had I known what I was looking at, Had I known what I was doing, I probably would identified that in the first 21 days, and I could have probably put it back on the market instead of 45 days into it. So Christy, talk to us about title commitments.
Okay, so look, just a little bit about title insurance. It's different from other types of insurance, which y'all probably already know. It protects your owners against past errors related to the ownership, like past spouses that maybe weren't included on a conveyance, or ex-spouses, heirs, stuff like that. It insures against like unpaid liens, unpaid child support liens, HOA liens. It also insures against fraudulent documents that may have been recorded in the past on on that property. So more and more we're dealing with fraud, as y'all know, and we first began with like the wiring instructions and wire transferring funds, and now we're seeing our underwriters be more and more picky on verifying documents that have been recorded on the property to make sure that they were, legitimate. So they're seeing an uptick in fraudulent documents, and I think that has a lot to do with like the things you hear about stealing title, and people taking title to your property and getting a loan on it without you knowing, stuff like that. So it insures against all of that kind of stuff. It doesn't insure for things that are going to happen in the future, like your homeowner's policy insures for like, you know, damage from weather and stuff like that, or fire. But this is an insurance that insures for past issues. So then when you're reviewing your title commitments, Schedule A is going to show you what we are insuring. It's going to give you the amount of the coverage that we're giving to the buyer, and if they're getting financing to the lender. It's going to show you who we're insuring. It's going to show you the property that we're insuring. So Schedule A is what we do insure. Schedule B is, so if you're representing a buyer, you're going to want to look at both Schedules B and C. So Schedule B is what we're not insuring. We're taking exception to. So it's what we found in our research that affect the property, like the restrictions, any CC&Rs, any deed restrictions, any easements that affect the property, anything on the survey that we see that needs to be specifically accepted to. And then they'll pull out things specifically in those CC&Rs and give specific exceptions, like to setbacks and building setbacks and other easements and drainage easements and stuff like that. Or if they see any encroachments on the property, they'll list those all on Schedule B. So when a buyer looks at Schedule B, or sometimes they have an attorney representing them, that's what the attorney will make objection to, certain items on our Schedule B. And when they do, we'll send that to our examiner and say, hey, they're making an objection to this. Can we look at it closer? What would it take for us to take that exception off of our title commitment? So that's what Schedule B is. Now, Schedule C is going to show you everything that we have to do to clear up before we can close and insure. So this is going to show you if the seller has any liens on the property, if they have any voluntary liens or forced liens on the property that we have to get payoffs for and releases and stuff like that, or if we're requiring any documents on that pertain to the seller or the buyer, depending on how they're taking title. Like if it's an entity or a trust or something like that, we're going to require certain things. So Schedule C is kind of our checklist to mark stuff off so that we can get to the closing table.
That's awesome.
So,
Hey, real quick, I want to ask a question
mhm,
because everybody gets very confused on this. So
mhm.
on our 1 to 4 contracts under title policy and survey, if you jump down to
Yes.
section A, number
Mhm,
8, there's you can choose 1 or 2, and 1 says will not be amended or deleted from the title policy, or
mhm.
will be amended to read shortages in the area at the expense of such and such. Can you explain those two things?
I sure can. So on the Schedule B of your title commitment, there's a promulgated exception that takes exception to encroachments and protrusions, overlapping of improvements. and shortages in area. So that's the standard exception that's on every title policy unless you get survey coverage. So this paragraph in the contract deals with if your buyer wants that coverage on their policy. So if you check the first one that says will not be amended, then that exception will remain the same. It will not be changed. Will take full exception to survey issues. If you mark the one that says will not or will be amended to read shortages in area, that means that everything in that exception on your buyer's policy is going to be marked out except for the words shortages in area, so that we're only taking exception to how many square feet are within that lot, because we don't insure we ensure the legal description and whatever the plat describes that property to be, but we're not saying it's so many square feet. But you get coverage for any encroachments, like if the neighbors improvements encroach onto your property, if your improvements encroach onto their property or over a building setback or into an easement, if the buyer ever suffers a loss because they were asked to remove those improvements, then the title policy would cover that.
So
If you mark will be amended.
will be amended, and
Mhm.
you have to, so to mark will be amended, that means there has to be a survey with it.
There has to be a survey. It has to be a title survey. It has to be legible. It has to be signed and stamped by the surveyor. And it has to include all of the property that we're being asked to insure. And it can't be a property that's been replatted since that survey.
Okay. Okay, perfect. And how much does how much does that insurance cost?
So it is 5% of the policy premium based on the sale price. So whatever your sale price is, you look at your chart and get the title premium, or call me and I can give it to you. And then it's 5% of that. Now that's the case if we're issuing a residential owner's policy, which
Okay.
means that the property is improved and that your buyer is an individual, not an entity or a trust. So if either one of those is the case, it's going to be a non-residential policy. Even if it's improved, but your buyer is an entity or trust, it's going to be a non-residential policy. Then it's 15%. So it's a significant difference.
Okay.
And sometimes what we run into is the contract comes in with an individual as the buyer, and they've marked that they do want the coverage, and then they change and assign it to an entity. And so we've already disclosed fees to the seller, and then it triples when they change that. So sometimes that can be an issue that the agents have to work out to see who's going to pay that difference.
And if there's no encroachment to begin with, wouldn't it make more sense the buyer pays for that because you've already
Mhm.
identified there's no encroachment?
Yes.
So I know that when I'm negotiating contracts, if I'm the buyer, I always ask for it unless I
Mhm.
win, and then I don't ask for it. But if I'm for the seller, I'm like, I'm not paying for that. There's no encroachment, there's no
Right.
shortages. So why am I
Mhm.
covering something that they may do later on?
Yeah.
Uh, okay, well, that's good to know. Does anybody, I want to open that one up because I feel like, go ahead. Anybody
Mhm.
got questions? Steph, what you got?
Okay, so with the and/or signs, Christy, does that affect the entire cost of the title policy or
No.
only with that shortages?
Just that coverage, yes.
Okay,
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I
Anybody
did not know that. I did not know that.
Mhm.
And I do a lot of and/or signs, so
Yes.
that's good information to know. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Okay, anybody else have a question for Christy about that or about the title policy? Tina says, I really enjoy when the title company sends me the title policy and they let me know what needs attention immediately.
Yes.
I love that too, Tina. I had one title company. They will never tell me anything that's in there. They're like, just look at this. And then Christy will be like, look at section so and so, number so and so. And I'm like, oh,
Yes.
okay, on that. Very good. All right. I
Yeah.
love that. How many days, just a quiz for you agents, how many days does a title company, does our contracts give the title company to give us a title commitment? What's our contract say? Guys, there is like 80 something ways that a buyer can get out of contract. Commitment. Within 20 days after the title company receives a copy of this contract, seller shall furnish to the buyer a commitment of title insurance commitment and at the buyer's expense, legible copies of restricted covenants. Did y'all hear that? At the buyer's expense, legible copies of restricted covenants and documents evidencing exceptions in the commitment, that's the exception documents, other than the standard printed exceptions. Seller authorizes the title company to deliver the commitment and exception documents to the buyer at the buyer's address. Okay, it didn't say buyer's email. Please note that. Buyer's address shown in paragraph 21. If the commitment and the exception documents are not delivered to the buyer within the specified time, the time for delivery will automatically extend up to 15 days or 3 days before closing, whichever is earlier. If the commitment and exception documents are not delivered within the time required, the buyer may terminate this contract. So if you have a buyer, you should have a notification, like you should have something in a calendar that says when these things are due. On day 21, if I have not received the title commitment and I have a buyer, I will send an email to everyone that says, my buyer has not received the title commitment. Can you give me an update? That's all I say. I don't care one way or another when we get it, to be honest, but I just got my buyer 15 more days, but I also got my buyer an out on this contract that if they decide 3 days before closing, they don't want to buy this house, they can get they have the right to cancel the contract based on our 1 to 4 contract under, it is section 6B. And they can cancel the contract, get their earnest money back, regardless if it's been delivered or not. So again, your title company is very important in who you choose, because I know some title companies that I am pushing to get a title commitment, and I'll hear, well, we're only 2 people. We don't know what to tell you. I mean, they get really ugly about it. And I'm like, dude, I don't care. You got, as a seller, I need that title commitment. Like it already should have been done. So, how many of y'all have realized that was an out in your contract? Okay, if you didn't know that was an out, I do want to do a shameless plug for the state of Texas if you're in Texas. Actually, I think it's all over the United States. But in Texas, up to December 31st, you can take an accredited buyer's class for free. They are providing it for free. It gives you 16 credit hours, and they talk about the different ways to get out of contract. So I just wanted to tell you all about that because it's pretty important.
Tammy, one caveat on that.
Yeah.
To get that designation from
Nation.
NAR, you still have to do like 2 electives.
Yeah.
It still costs like 110 through Champions or something. Anyway, I found that out because I did some research. But NAR is giving like $250 towards that, most of the designation.
That's pretty cool. That's cool. I've taken the class a couple of times and have never, I don't like to pay people money, so I've never got the accreditation. I've just taken the class.
And where is that for?
It's through any of your associations. Candy Cook is going to be teaching it in December, I think December 15th and 16th. So look up on, go to Texas Association of Realtors, go to education and look for the accredited buyers class, and it's free. But Matthew's correct. To get the accreditation so you can get those initials behind your name, there's a whole bunch of other stuff you have to do. Christy, talk to us about T47s.
T47s, like you want to know the easiest way to get those notarized with us, or the importance of filling them out?
Yeah, filling them out and what you're looking for.
So on a T47, if there has been any changes to the property since that survey that's being provided, we need it described in that paragraph that says what has changed. But we also need those changes drawn in on the survey so that we can see where they are. So that our examiners can make a determination if they're willing to give survey coverage based on that, or if we're going to need a new survey.
Okay. Perfect. And the date on it, is it the date the survey was done or the date that they bought the property?
the date the survey was done. And a lot of times people don't want to put that date in there if they got the survey from another transaction from when they purchased. So if they do that, then we need the T47 that was used at that closing so that we have a fill in on the gap.
And you just, I fill mine out, guys. Find a title company that will also notarize for your people online for free because it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah.
I have found that when I let my clients notarize it, it's filled out incorrectly and we're having to redo it. And you will get somebody at a title company that will say, we can't accept this, but they don't say because the date is incorrect, please change the date. They just say we can't accept this, and then
Yeah.
everybody's in a turmoil.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to ask one more question, then we're going to open it up for everybody else. I want to ask a question about ladybird deeds.
Okay.
So a recent question that has come up is, let's say that I do a ladybird deed to my kids, but I'm still alive.
Yes,
And then something happens and I decide I want to sell the property.
you can. So a ladybird deed is keeping your ownership of the property until you pass away. And so if you sell it, then whoever you deeded to in that ladybird deed isn't entitled yet. So you can do that. You can still sell your property. It's still yours.
So would you, so like if this comes up, could we go straight through a title company, or do we need to go get an attorney to do something different before we actually sell it and put it in title?
So if you want to put a ladybird deed in place, you can go through us. We're not going to actually do the document. We're going to get our attorneys to, or you can go straight to an attorney and get legal advice with, the document preparation.
Okay, wonderful. The reason why I ask this is there's something happening in Austin right now where somebody's trying to sell a house and no title company will take the information. And I'm like, switch over to Concierge Title. Christy Wooten can help you because you can pretty.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I am going to, does anybody have any questions for Christy? Unmute your mics. Just ask her whatever. I'm going to tell y'all, Heirship is a big area and where I live at. So Christy is a rock star in all of these things.
Christy, what are some things on the listing side? What are things that you want us to already have ready for you to make things easy, to make transaction go fast, smooth, and all the things?
So on the listing side, I always tell agents, if you think that there's going to be anything that might come up on title, like if you know that there's a deceased owner, or if there, could be some type of easement issues or anything really, have us open title before you get a contract. Have us review those surveys before you get a contract so that we can let you know if there's anything that needs to be addressed ahead of time. As far as, when it goes under contract, as long as we have all of the contact information for your clients, and maybe even get, if they, the information, if they have a loan on their property, that would help, and those surveys.
So, portals, secure portals. Tell us about why they're required. And agents, we're really bad about going, I don't want to log in. I don't want to do that. But listen, we have to, and this is why.
Yeah. So what we do is we contact every buyer the day we get the contract. We have a conversation with them about wiring instructions, and you'd be amazed. Some people are very receptive and they're like, oh, I appreciate that. But there are some that still are like, you know what? I wire all the time. I'm fine. And I still give them the warning. I'm like, be sure that if you get any emails that look like they're coming from me, that look like they're coming from my title company or one of the agents involved in this transaction telling you to send money somewhere else, let us know. It's a big red flag. And we just want to have that conversation early on so that it doesn't happen to your clients. We also have and those of you who have used us know, we use Qualia, and there's a program within Qualia called Connect. And a lot of the agents don't like it because it's an extra, extra emails. It's an extra step. It's the portal, but it is secure. And we also use Certify ID for sellers wiring instructions, so that everything is verified and everybody is safe.
Okay, and then the other thing, just FYI, guys, if you get an email from a title company and it just has a link for you to click on, I think Highland Lakes Title recently has had this happen. Do not click the link. There's no reason why they should be sending you a link to click on. A title company is you're gonna get the portal invitation. Everything should be going through the portal, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. They came out and said it's a big hack thing, and what it is if you click that link, it hacks your computer and they get all of your information. Anybody else have any more questions for Christy when it comes to title? Christy, is there anything that you feel like that as realtors that we could do better for y'all?
No, actually, I think we've covered everything on my list.
That was actually the next thing that I was gonna ask is, we talked about from the listing side, from the buyer side, is there anything that we can do as buyer's agents to streamline the process and get it done, get it closed?
Y'all are all great. I occasionally have agents who don't give me all the contact information for their clients. And that just, it helps a lot when we have that up front and don't have to stop and find it. But that's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, on the contract, guys, on the 1 to 4 contract, I think that we forget, you'll see this a lot with sometimes older agents and I don't mean by age, they've just been in the business for a long time, where they put in, it's going to be in paragraph 21 under notices, they put their information only.
Yeah.
I'm going to say from a standpoint of a real estate agent, that's the fastest way for you to be sued. Those blocks in there, the addresses, the phone number, the emails, the copy of the email to you, those are very important because you're going to have some clients that they only respond by mail. So if Christy and them know there's no email and we communicate, hey, this is by mail, that title policy has to be mailed to them. But if they have an email, I am one that I want to be CC'd on everything because there's deadlines that have to be met. And after that's been sent to my client, I follow up with an email or a phone call to my client saying, hey, the title commitment came in today. Would you please review over it? I'm reviewing it too. Let me know if you have any questions. That is called delivery of notices. If you're the only one on there as the age, like under the email, it's your email and you're like, say at a football, let's just say a football game, and it's that day and there's something has to be answered that day by midnight and you don't answer it, you just killed the deal for your client. And that's not a situation that you want to be put in ever. And I tell Christy all the time, I better be CC'd on everything because it's my responsibility as well to make sure that all those things are being met in a timely basis. And while Christy is helping me get a deal done, I'm also helping them get a deal done. And
Yes.
I have one of my clients that two of her contracts canceled out. She's never cashed the option checks. She doesn't answer emails. She won't respond back. She's got option checks just floating out there. But finally, they reached out to me and said that she's not canceling these. She's not depositing these. And I'm like, well, I've never seen any emails. Well, this was Abilene. They weren't including me in on the emails. Once they included me, I was able to make that phone call. So you want to make sure those sections are completely filled out. Also in that, according to that, the other sections filled out too. So even if it's not your client and you know it's a deadline that it's important and that agent's not responding back, you can, in that situation, include everybody, including those other clients on an email.
Mhm.
All these agents like to say you can't do that, but yes, you can. Let's say it's a contingency where you're calling notice due or option period is over, that kind of thing. You can include everybody. I just wanted to throw that out there, Christy, because Christy knows I better be CC'd in on everything.
Yes.
I need to know what's going on. I'm a little bit
Yes.
of a control freak. Nothing's worse than getting to the end and finding out there's a problem and you didn't know
Mhm.
about it the entire time. And you're like, dude, I could have helped y'all with that.
Mhm.
All right. Anybody else got any other questions for Christy? So concierge title is a little different than some titles. Not all title companies have this. What is the program y'all use to deposit earnest money and option?
Zocum. So if your clients don't want to send a wire for their earnest money and option fee, because sometimes there's a fee associated with it, they can use our app called Zocum to take a picture of a check and deposit it directly to our account. But when it comes time for closing, the funds do have to come by wire transfer. We do also allow for cashier's checks. They are putting a hold on our cashier's checks for 3 to 5 days. So we ask that we get those ahead of time so that it doesn't delay funding.
Nice, nice. When we talk about earnest and termination, if y'all look in your contract on number 5, I want to point out number 5 and look at section, let's see. Bum, bum, bum. Section A3. The amount the escrow agent receives under this paragraph shall be applied first to the option fee, then to the earnest money, and then to the additional earnest money. There is a time frame that is credited to that buyer. So let's say that you have $100 option and $2,500 earnest, and they only send in $2,500. 100 gets them the option,
Mhm.
but only 2,400 gets them earnest. So our contracts state within 3 days, the earnest money has to be, earnest and option has to be delivered. So on day 4, if that full amount hasn't been done, they've not met the guidelines of the earnest money, regardless if they have option in there or not. So as a listing agent, if another broker to talk about what you can do, because at that point if your broker is in agreement, you can kick somebody out of a contract. And don't forget, your fiduciary duty is not to the buyer, it's to the seller. So you always want to make sure that title companies are receiving those earnest and option as quickly as possible. Some title companies will hold everything until everything's in. That's not, that's not the rule. They've got to receipt it as soon, and they got to send it in stages. I know that's hard for y'all at title, Christy, because it's easier just to receipt everything at once.
Right.
But
Yeah.
y'all gotta make sure that I'm on them, like, where's our receipt? Where's our receipt? I need to know where it's at.
Yeah.
And I tell y'all that because if you're representing a seller and that full stuff hasn't come in and another offer comes in and you don't do what's in their best interest, who's gonna get sued? Who's liable? Just tell me who's liable. Anybody? Is it Christy? Is it the buyer's agent? Is it the buyer? No, it's you. It's you. We can't play good old boy here. You got to follow the rules. So you always want to bring your broker in on it.
Mhm.
I know these contracts like the back of my hand. All right. I don't have any other questions. Anybody have any other questions for Christy or anything? Just any other questions in general? Christy, are title companies allowed to order surveys for us?
Yes.
Did y'all hear that?
Yes.
I've heard title companies say, we can't do that. Legally, we can't do that.
Yeah, we can. Of course, we get your approval first, and we get quotes and ask which one y'all want to go with. So we don't just go out and decide we're going to order from this company, no matter what they're going to charge. So we're going to get quotes for you and let you decide, but we will order that for you.
Got it. Good, good. On heirship paperwork, is the contract, should it be in the estate of name or should it be in the heirship's name?
So it depends on if the deceased has a probated will and if that probate is closed. So if it's closed, then it's going to be in the name of the heirs who benefited from that will. If it's still in the estate, then it'll be the executor as, the executor's name on behalf of the estate. So it just depends. And if it's heirship affidavits, then it's going to end up being those heirs. So you can put them on the contract as the seller,
Okay.
but then we're going to have to go through the process to determine that they are the legal heirs.
Okay, got
Yeah.
it. Got it. Perfect. So sometimes easier just to start out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Hey,
until we
Chris,
know.
Yes, we
Yeah,
know.
yes.
Christy,
And
I
those
have a
are the good
question.
situations to open title early. So,
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Vicky.
I have a question, Christy. So, I've had a couple of title companies, one tell me yes, that title can do this, one telling me no, they're not gonna do it.
Okay.
And that is if you have a manufactured house on a piece of property, the property is a real property and the manufactured house is still under personal, it was never put together. Do
Mhm.
y'all go and do that for us? Or is that
Yes.
something that okay, because I had one title company that says, you can go do it, you go do the paperwork yourself. And I'm like, I don't know what the heck I'm doing here, but I did it. But still,
Yeah.
okay, so at
No,
least y'all
we
do
do
it.
that as part of closing. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Can we
Christy
go back a
is
second?
incredible with that. I had a situation where, again, same thing, the different title company, and almost blew up my deal. The
Mhm.
title company almost blew up the deal, and I was like, I said, I was representing the seller, and I was like, man, we wouldn't have even known, like, that Christy would have just taken care of this, and we would not even be having this conversation.
Yeah.
Tina,
But
did
then
you
my little lady was all upset. So
Aw.
Chris dang at that.
Go ahead, Tina.
I wanted to ask to go back to the question about the heirs versus the estate.
Uh-huh.
So what was better to start out with? Was the heirs' names or the estate name?
I think what we were saying is if we don't know at the time of contract what they've done, if there's probate, if it's closed, if we need to do affidavits of heirship, then it's best to put the estate of the deceased.
Okay. But if we know it's been probated, then
Mhm.
put the heirs.
You can, and then if the probate is closed, sometimes they're still in process and they close in the name of the estate with the executor signing off, and then the executor distributes per the will.
Okay.
So it just depends. But like I said, those are all good situations to open title early so that you know before you have a contract.
Yeah, that's kind of what I do. If I know there's errors and everything, like
Mhm.
I'll send one over to Christy today and say, hey, here's the heirship paperwork. Here's all this. Let's open title. And she'll tell me right away, hey, we've got this, this, and this.
Okay. That's good to know.
Yeah.
So Christy, another question. So what happens if you, I mean, like I have a client right now. She's on the selling side.
Mm.
The house is in her name per county, but she is married.
Okay.
When I list it, would it be listed under both of their names, or would you list it under just her name? Because I've had titles companies tell me if it's under her name, then put it under her name. But if they're married, they still, I know he still has to sign a
Yes.
form. Do you do it that way, or do you just go ahead and put both of them on there? Because I've had
So
both.
as far as we're concerned, it's fine to just put her on the contract and have her as the only seller, because maybe she's the only one who's going to get proceeds, but he will have to sign because they're married. So he'll be included on the deed. Now, if it's a situation where it's community property and they've lived there and he's contributed, then you might want to put them both as sellers so that and money's going into a joint account. So it just depends. We're not going to say he has to be listed as a seller, but if he's going to be getting part of the proceeds, then yes.
Okay.
Okay, if you're in our area, LCRA is a big thing. Double check with your title companies beforehand to see if they will file the LCRA paperwork. There is a title company local that will not file any LCRA paperwork. And if you don't know that and you don't file it, then at the end, when they get ready to sell it or whatever, it never was transferred to the new people's names. So
Talk
that's
about what that means.
what area are you in, Tina?
I'm in Victoria. What are you saying? LCRA?
LCRA, so you don't have it in Victoria. So LCRA is Lower Colorado River Authority. They have governing ownership over all of our septics. And we have to have certain paperwork done and inspections done by the Lower Colorado River Authority to be able to do a resale certificate.
Do y'all have
Okay,
anything like
and
that
what does
with the
the
Guadalupe?
LCR stand for? Lower
Colorado River Authority.
Colorado River Authority, okay.
And LCRA actually goes throughout the entire state of Texas, but that we, in our area, is the only area that they govern the septics.
Okay, we don't have that here. That's
Y'all
good
do
to
not
know.
have that there. Yeah.
Okay.
What were you gonna say, Steph?
I was gonna ask if Tina had, I used to live in Victoria. I was gonna ask if they had anything like that with the Guadalupe down there.
Yes, we do the Guadalupe Water River Authority, and as long as we put it in the contract, because if we look at our if you pull the CAD, it tells you where all your taxes are going to. If there is a river authority or water authority on there, we disclose that.
Yeah.
So I
that's
guess
under
it's about the same thing, huh?
So that's under disclosures. We don't have to disclose that it's an LCRA septic. It's up to the buyer to know. It's not up to the seller, but under you're referencing on the contract, it's going to be section, hold on, 6E11. Required notices, the following notices have been given or are attached to this contract, for example, MUD, WCID, Water Improvement, Conservation Improvement Districts, and PIDs. So those
Right,
have,
and also, I'm sorry to interrupt you, our title companies are also having everybody sign a form at closing.
correct, but I will tell y'all, the rule is that when you take your accredited buyers class, it is the buyer's agent's responsibility to disclose it before the contract is executed.
Yes.
If it's not disclosed up front before execution, they can get out of the contract.
Okay.
Hey, Christy, I do have another question come up.
Yes, ma'am.
On POAs. And so I had a property in the subdivision that I live in that I was selling.
Hmm.
The family sold their other house. We know there's no POA out here. It's never been one there's used to be one, but it's disemboweled, so it's never been there. It was still attached to the house that was selling for some reason. Nobody else is out here had it. He was the president of the POA.
Okay.
How do you go about getting that off of there?
So we see that a lot in our area where there are restrictions that are recorded. But there's no active board and they're not charging any dues. They're not enforcing anything. It's gonna be on the title policy because we have to take exception to those CC&Rs if they're filed of record. Unless they file something to dissolve them and remove them from the property. And that rarely happens, but we don't require, once we can confirm that there's no active board and no active dues being collected, we're not going to require anything further, but we will still take exception, like I said, to those CC&Rs.
Okay.
So does that kind of answer?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so then the last question I have is, let's just hypothetically say at the the contract is terminated, earnest money needs to be returned to the buyer, seller refused to sign off on it. What happens on y'all's end?
On our end. So if it's terminating and it's not within the option period, then we have to have a release signed off on by everybody. We actually want a release of earnest money, even if it's within option. But we can get it released if that's not going to happen, if it's within the option period. But any other reason that it cancels after that option period, we have to have a release signed off by everybody, or we'll start our 15-day notice to the other party. and say that this party has made demand for the earnest money and here's a copy of their demand. You have 15 days to respond or it's going to be released to them. And so then they would need to submit their demand and then we would just hold it until either, they come to an agreement with each other or a court tells us what to do with those funds. Now, if they don't respond, then we go ahead and release it to the demanding party.
Nice. Some title companies don't do the 15-day demand. They just let it sit.
Mhm.
Yeah, no.
I was talking to a couple the other day. Their earnest money has been sitting at the title company for 3 years.
Oh, wow.
And it was based on, they got to closing and found out there was a mandatory POA with
Uh-huh.
all these, or HOA, mandatory HOA with all these rules and these,
Uh-huh.
they're like, we knew nothing about this. We're not
Wow.
buying this. We don't want to be in an HOA. We're not buying this property. And the title company refuses to release the money to anyone. It's just sitting there.
Oh, wow. And the seller never eventually sold the property?
They did sell it. They went to another title company.
Well, then they should be able to get their earnest money back. If those, well, I
they
would
went
think,
back, but
I don't know, that would be a legal question, but yeah, that them holding that earnest money should tie up the property from,
Mhm.
Well,
yeah.
what a lot of people do, I know when I first got into real estate, everybody else can attest to what they've heard, just change title companies. That's what I was always told. Just change title companies.
Yeah.
So, all right, last call. Anybody got any questions for Christy? And then we'll wrap this call up. Christy, thank you for taking time out of your day for
No,
us.
thank you. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Some really good information there.